Hi everyone, welcome back to the Brydge Club podcast. This is your host, Ruffin. Today I'm chatting with Joan Nguyen. She is the founder of Bumo, the best way for families to book on-demand childcare at daycare, preschools, and drop-in camps for school-aged children. Bumo is backed by venture capital investors and celebrity advisors like Jessica Alba. She's been featured in The Today Show, Forbes, Techcrunch, and more. Prior to Bumo, Joan previously built a global testing prep and educational consulting company. So Joan, so excited to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. So excited to be here and always excited to talk about Bumo.
Can you kick it off by sharing just a little bit about your original inspiration for Bumo? Like what inspired you to first start building this business?
So V1 of Bumo, oh my gosh. So that takes me all the way back to like 2018, right? So I have a fresh baby, right? My son, he is 3 months old, very fresh baby. And I remember my friend told me that Chriselle, my co-founder, who was pregnant with her second child at the time, had this like great idea for something. I was still working on Mary Education and my first company and thought that that was just going to be it, right? I was going to have Mary Education, my global test prep company, for the rest of my life. And so I bring this baby, my baby, Elliot, with me to this house and meeting with Chriselle. And she's talking about this idea for a co-working space with on-site childcare. At the time, I was shuffling my team to my house to work because I so much wanted to be co-located with Elliot, my son. And when my daughter was born, it was very much the same thing. I was very much co-located with her as well at the house. It was such a luxury. And it's like, wow, what if parents could do this all the time? How many problems would it solve? And, I felt that pain point so much. And so I really wasn't part of Bumo. I was sort of like this glorified intern almost, right? I was just sitting there and engaged in a conversation. So a guest, right, on the Bumo stage, and then got so obsessed with it. Eventually, Chriselle, my co-founder, said, okay, maybe you can just be part of it and you can, have a small stake in the company. And then long story short, she was like, just be the co-founder and just be the CEO and just like ride this ship and, set it to sail. And so that's, we got started. So we wanted to build this co-working space with on-site childcare. Short story, long and longer is the fact that we were supposed to open March of 2020. Obviously, the world shut down. And then we decided to pivot very quickly to online school and taught kids all around the world, 30 countries plus, online chemistry, online math, online dancing, whatever, anything kids wanted to learn. We were teaching it online, both synchronously and asynchronously. And then we, of course, had our lease. We still had to open 2021. And here I was kind of coming from running this like bootstrapped company that I started when I was 19, Mary Education, never thinking that I was going to do anything else, mesmerized by this idea that Chriselle had for a co-working space with on-site childcare, faced with the world pandemic that forced me to build this online school. And I saw the scale of that. And then I felt like I had to wind back down, right, to the brick and mortar space. And even though it was exciting and it's so beautiful and the curriculum so great and so compelling, I felt like I could do more, right? I could reach more people. I could scale faster. And a brick and mortar space is not built for scale. And I think that was at the time too, when, all the things with the brick and mortar, like co-working spaces, it was like it had reached its height. And at that time, it reached its very, very low. And so it was very clear to me that I had to think of something else. So when I was operating the space, I had to turn parents away. Women would come to me very pregnant and say like, I want to start, childcare in 6 months when my baby is born or when my baby is 6 months old. And I would have to say, I'm so sorry, but we are so full. And like, 2 years, that's when you can start. And I was like, this is so dumb. I was like, I can't, we built this brand, right, that people loved. And then all of a sudden I'm like turning people away, and they have a need, a very real need for childcare. They want, as a consumer, they want to throw money, right, at a company that I built, and I cannot take their money. But what was even more insane was that every day I came to the space, we had spots. Like we had open seats, right? Kids were out sick, kids were on vacation. We had enrollment gaps, right? Absenteeism is a constant in childcare and in schools in general, right? So I saw this open inventory and decided to think of a way to utilize this underutilized space, monetize it in order to both support not only families, right, but another segment of people that I care very dearly about, providers, right? Childcare providers, meaning daycares and preschools and camp founders and owners and operators. So that was the genesis really of the Bumo marketplace.
Yeah, and I think what's super fascinating is you bring in this experience from like actually running one of these childcare facilities, which is incredible. What were some of the other like pain points you learned from operating the location in Century City?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much. It's like I got a crash course in running and operating a daycare. I learned that the margins suck, right? They just suck, and it's a very antiquated industry. So people have been doing the things that they've been doing the same ways for a really long time. So what I mean by that is like, okay, we're going to have a monthly tuition, and we are going to charge a tuition. We're going to collect that tuition. That's going to be our kind of like top line. And then our fixed costs are the same. Our variable costs pretty much stay the same. And it's like you have this very, very thin margin. And there was no other way to have an extra stream of revenue or increase your top line without increasing your tuition, which then would lead to churn, right? Because parents are very used to having an idea of their tuition range. And so that was something that I learned. Another thing that I learned too is that for providers to be really successful, they need to do what they're good at. You know, everybody has a zone of genius, right? When somebody comes out and they create a childcare facility, some of them are operators, some of them are, business savvy. We have like some of those big daycares. We're not talking about those. There are hundreds of thousands of childcare providers, like facilities, like in-home and center-based facilities in the United States. And big daycares, big corporate daycares own a droplet of that, right? Most of them are owned by single operators. And these single operators create these daycares and facilities because they love it, right? They love to teach kids. They're passionate about early childhood education. They're not price strategists, right? They're not biz dev people. And so I realized that, wow, in order to navigate this like very complex business, you have to have really the chops, right, to run and operate a business efficiently. But then you also have to have this other top line too. So that was like a really weird thing for me to understand. And also there's the dearth of childcare. I realized that was a myth too, right? Because there's absenteeism. So there's like that very popular statistic saying that 51% of Americans live in a childcare desert. And I disagree. Like, I actually disagree with that because there is available inventory right under our noses. There's just no technology to connect that inventory, that supply with the demand until Bumo.
I just ran into this issue with my niece who lives in Playa Vista. Her nanny didn't show up, and I get like a panic text from my in-law, like, can you come like help for the day? And it's like, they need to get on Bumo, which I told them. But it's like a very big problem that I feel like hits so many different families. So it's so smart to tap into this unused inventory.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. It's like something that has just been here this whole time.
Can you share a little bit more around like the childcare crisis in the US and like why now especially? I mean, probably for it's been an important time to build in this, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So it's definitely a very important time. So childcare has been a crisis for a very, very long time. Parents always find it very hard to find childcare. The supply is very low. It's stagnant actually, and even declining a little bit, and more so I can double click on that as to why. So it's always been a crisis, but I think because childcare has been viewed as something that casts a burden mainly on mothers. It has been widely, one, disregarded, not really paid attention to. Venture money hasn't been really behind it as much. But now I think a lot of women, mothers, are getting loud about childcare, right? And they're getting loud about it in the best ways. ROI arguments, like BCG just did an amazing report with Moms First, where it was just like, we need childcare. It was like, we need childcare because this is your return on investment as a company. Like, if your employees have childcare, right? We see like the socioeconomic impact of childcare. I mean, how it impacts women and their professional, mobility, right? Return to work numbers, productivity, how many days of, absenteeism results in lack of childcare and productivity. I mean, what is it? $14 billion is lost, on an annual basis because of lack of childcare, right? And I think it's now there's organizations like Moms First and that always comes to mind, in the Care Gap by Blessing at DCN, who talk about this need for childcare during this, again, very momentous time. And I feel like the crisis is also compounding it too, because we had a crisis in terms of there was not enough childcare, but now with the funding, right, the government funding from the pandemic that kind of helped childcares stay afloat and providers, that has largely dried up. And you see providers shutting down. I mean, we have seen providers shut down. Providers will say, I'm sorry, like, we're closing our doors at the end of this month. And these are providers that have been in business for 10, 20 years, right? And they have no choice but to do that. And like, oh my gosh, I wish I just met them sooner for Bumo so that we could drive more families to them. So I think that's compounding it. In California, especially, there was an article last week in the LA Times, and this is something that I and my team, we had discussed months ago, right? There's universal preschool, which is great. Of course, universal pre-K, TK is amazing, right? Because free education, what better thing than that? However, what's happening is that it is also impacting our providers, right? So providers who were giving care, paid care for 3-4-year-olds are now seeing a huge exodus of these kids because universal preschool is available. So of course you're going to pick free over pay or pick free, right? And so these daycares and preschools have had to navigate that too. So that has definitely impacted childcare. And so in that sense, there is a crisis. Also, it's a bad business model the way it stands. Providers just can't make a lot of money. I mean, one of my providers told me a few weeks ago when I talked to her, she's like, I am so grateful for Bumo because there are days where I don't even know I can pay for my groceries for myself. And then a Bumo payment comes through and I know I can't pay for my groceries now, right? So that's all the activity that's happening right now. I think it's a mixture of also the fact that post-pandemic, there's flexible work. So the near site, on-site childcare, for some types of jobs, obviously for healthcare, that makes sense. I think for a lot of companies that are fully remote, partially remote, hybrid, it doesn't really solve the problems that they have. I think that post-pandemic, families have really valued time a lot more with their children, and therefore they value flexibility. So families want to travel more. They want time with their kids. Even for me, I remember I was that parent pre-pandemic. It's like 5:59, picking up my daughter. And then now I'm like, 4:30, let's go pick them up. I can't leave them there that long. And that was really a post-pandemic thing where we just spent so much time with our kids and started valuing that time. So I think there's economic, societal, social, government infrastructure. There's just so many things that have catalyzed this whole movement around childcare. But obviously it's still something that has yet to be fully fixed, right? And I know when that's going to happen, it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of different people, not just Bumo, to fix this problem.
And like so much has changed in the past few years, as you mentioned. So like speaks to the power of having such a flexible option as Bumo. So really excited to see the change that you guys are able to make. So tell me more about like how you actually made the pivot from running the brick and mortar space to like what Bumo is today.
Oh my gosh, that was a windy journey too. So, starting the online school, it was like total whiplash, right? Because we did it in 11 days. I mean, we didn't really have much time to react. It was, I remember it, April 9th, we decided to get a domain, boomobrain.com. 11 days later, we launched the website. It was like a whirlwind of activity. And we didn't have time to think. We didn't have time to process. This time, I really wanted to do it differently. Not, taking too much time and overthinking things to perfection. What we decided to do though was because it was a two-sided marketplace, test the demand side first. So the first thing that we did was think, okay, is there demand? Do people really want this? It's kind of weird, right? Dropping your child off for half day a day. You're used to like this fixed childcare system. So we started with our Century City location. We added some slots, and of course, like people loved it. It's, if anybody's been to our location in Century City, it's on the second floor at Century City Mall, which is the best mall in the world. I feel like it's so, yeah, of course people want to drop their kids off here. It's an amazing location. It's really beautiful. So we ended up renting and piloting. It was during winter break, a location, and it was not the antithesis almost of Bümo Century City. It had like concrete floors, like bars on the windows, like not this polished and shiny place. Care was still very good, right? And so we saw people were booking it. People were booking half day, a full day, a week, whatever it was. And then I went to our office in Pasadena where we were working from, and I told the team, "You guys got to go. We got to work from home. We're going to turn this into sort of an ad hoc care space and just see if it has legs." And so we just started doing that and testing the demand side. And then what happened was we found proof of concept right with that. Then 2023, I started going out, literally knocking on doors, cold calling, getting a few daycares to just listen to me and to just kind of like hear what I had to say. And they were, I want to say they were jazzed in the beginning because, again, it's an industry that is like very resistant to change, but they listened to me. And some of them were excited. Some of them were pessimistic. And we decided to test out that side of the marketplace. And we saw parents booking those locations as well. And then short story long is like a year and a half later, we have this two-sided marketplace now. So it was like a pivot, not like an overnight sort of pivot. It was really thoughtful. Building a marketplace is notoriously hard. And we did it with great intention.
For the providers, what was your pitch? And also, how do you think about like vetting the providers that come onto the platform?
Yeah. So for the providers, I just had to think about what was the value proposition for them, right? And the biggest pain point for a provider is money and enrollment, which is really money. And so I just had to show them, look, you can make money off of this. And then also having them believe that there's spots too, because I feel like we all live in this like vortex where we believe that there are no childcare spots at all, right? Even the providers themselves who see the absenteeism, like it's almost like they're so used to it that they don't register, that kids are not there. And so a lot of times providers would just say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're full. Like we don't have any spots available." And like, how many kids are here today? How many kids are missing? I was like, okay, you have 10 kids missing. That's $200 a kid per day. That's $2,000 that you can make out just by putting it on Bumo. We don't even charge you anything. And so that was something that was really exciting to the providers, right? Is like, okay, wow, I there's no skin off my back. I don't have to do anything. Bumo kind of does everything for me, and I can make some money. And so some of these providers then started making more money. And some of our providers have been on the platform for 10 months and have made $30,000 of just extra revenue. So that was one part of resistance. And then the second is just like, it sounds, the saying is like, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And the hard part is like when you have something that's too good to be true and it's actually true, it's really hard to sell. So that was another part too. But we were lucky because of Century City, right? Daycare providers, they know about our location. We're kind of like this like beautiful, pristine location and had a lot of media and buzz around it. So that really helped us build a lot of trust too. And so that mitigated some of that for the people who didn't know. They were like, who are you? Why are you calling me? And why are you coming to my childcare? So I think those were the biggest things. And of course, it's just change. Nobody likes change. I mean, that's especially in an industry that doesn't change.
And I also can imagine like some providers are like, is this going to add more of a headache to like our operations?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because if you think about it, and this is part of our branding that we're changing too as a company and I think even when I met you, Ruffin, like I positioned Bumo as just like on-demand childcare, right? And that sounds very like, oh my gosh, I'm going to blink and somebody's going to be here, like at my door and wanting me to take care of their child. But Bumo has really transformed, even in the last few months, to this idea of flexible childcare, right? So this provider isn't necessarily, and this happens too, right? You can get this one child one day and never see them again. That can happen for sure. We can't control that. But what we see a behavior of parents, it's interesting, is that it's not like you're getting a new kid every day and they're never going to come back. Parents crave flexibility and they crave autonomy and they crave optionality, right? So you might see that same child for this flexible childcare maybe once this week, twice next week, maybe 3 times next month. And so it's not like a new kid every day. And then when providers see that, it feels a lot better. It feels like, okay, this is what I'm kind of used to because I do have part-time students. I do have kids who come in 2 times a week, 3 times a week. What does it matter if they come Monday, Wednesday, Thursday versus like Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, right? So I think that was the big thing that changed a lot for their mindset.
Amazing. And so you're obviously live in Los Angeles. Have you launched in other cities and how are you thinking about that considering building marketplaces?
Yeah. So we're in LA and we're expanding in LA. We're expanding into Orange County, starting with Irvine. We have a huge demand there. And sprinkling up to San Francisco and then launching in New York. So our plan is by the end of next year, we'll be very much live in New York and San Francisco and all of LA and Orange County.
And I'm curious to hear a little bit also more about your background building the education consulting company. Like, how has been building Bumo completely different or similar to your first experience as an entrepreneur?
Well, it was totally different. And so building Mary Education, my first company, I was like 19, 20, and I didn't even know you could raise money. You see people raising money, you hear about it, but I felt like it was this thing that just special people did, right? And I had $3,000 in my bank account at the time, and that was my seed money that I used to build Mary Education. And it really started with, one family at a time, one customer at a time, and it was, in very different ways. Mary Education was very capital constrained. We were bootstrapped. We were running on our own cash flow. It taught me incredible discipline and taught me to be incredibly capital efficient, which of course helped with, Bumo as well, because in Bumo, I, felt like it was like, whoa, I basically hit the revenue numbers that took me 10 years to hit for Mary Education in like a year and a half, right? And so that was interesting for me. And it was like kind of not really grow at all costs, but you're growing at a more rapid pace. And it was weird to have investors, right? And it's weird. And it's like almost like an even bigger thing because I just didn't want to let anybody down. And I think that also has helped us navigate Bumo because, in our first round of capital, like we've raised like this first like tranche, we raised like 5 million. That helped us launch pretty much 3 companies, right? It was like Bumo, the physical workspace, which is like, truly, like, we weren't even a vanilla show. We built it from like zero to nothing. And then we launched the online school, which had 100,000 classes booked. And then we launched the online marketplace. So we seeded with 5 million over the course of 5 years through a pandemic, through a post-pandemic, through an almost recession, right? 3 different companies. So learned definitely very much to be capital efficient. So I think it was different, right? The same learnings were there: capital efficiency, running lean, running small. But I think it's the pace that was a lot different. It was a different pace.
Yeah. Since it was your first time kind of tapping into venture capital, how did you navigate that? And like any advice or learnings from raising VC dollars?
Yeah, I would say talking to as many people as possible, not being shy about it. I was very much aware that it was a little bit out of my comfort zone. I remember, I don't say this now, but I wouldn't say it back then or even like 2 months ago, but I'll say it now, that I remember the first time the first investor wanted to invest, and they were like, can you send me the term sheet? And I was like, what the fuck is a term sheet? So I did not know what it was. And then I remember I actually went on Canva and I found a template and I made the term sheet. It was like so pretty. And then the investor even said, she was like, this is the prettiest term sheet I've ever seen. And so, I think asking questions and not being shy. And that was, I figured it out because I did ask a lot of questions and, ask friends, and everybody knows somebody, right? The world is so, so small who can help you find answers. I also learned to take money from people that really believe in you, right? And really see what you're building, because then and trust you. I feel like I'm so fortunate to have had investors who trusted me throughout this process, because nobody batted an eyelash. Nobody emailed me like, why are you changing from, I invested in a brick and mortar company and like now it's an online company. They just trusted, and then they were excited. Like, Joan, thank you for, navigating us through this shitstorm and turning us from this brick and mortar space that was going to die into some viable online company. And thank you for like now turning it from a brick and mortar, a singular, like linear growth pattern, to like a hyper scalable online tech enabled marketplace. Right. So they really, really had a lot of trust in me. And quite honestly, I don't know if that was by design either necessarily, because truthfully, those were the only people that would invest in me, were the people who really knew me really well. Our first, few million that we raised was, mainly angels and friends and family, people in our network, a few VCs, but there were really not huge checks. And so wasn't really by design. It wasn't like I had like a huge VC check and I was like, oh no, sorry, I actually want to raise from like 30 people instead. And so that's kind of how that worked out. But I think that's what I learned. I learned ask questions, get a good attorney, and make sure that you find the right investors who really believe in you and what you're building.
Well, I was going to ask, did you have to have any like hard conversations around the pivots with investors? But it sounds like maybe
None.
not.
Nope.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That says so much about who is backing you. I love that. I have like founders ask me about navigating pivots. Like I've heard that question a lot from founders. Anything you can share around the pivots you made and like how you knew it was just time to like pivot and go that next direction?
Yeah. First pivot was by force, right? It was a worldwide pandemic and we just had to do it. Like truly pivot or die as a company. And so that one was harder but easier, right? I would say the brick and mortar space to the digital space, you have to just think about what you're trying to build and the mission that you are trying to achieve, right? And for us, it was making childcare accessible. It was and making it scalable, right? It was, solving the problems on both sides of the marketplace, which is the providers enabling them, building more supply without building more suppliers, right? And then for the childcare side, it was like making it accessible, and all that stuff. And so I think when we pivoted the second time, it was a test and learn, right? We were very much testing things. We're still testing things now, even though we've pivoted. We're micro testing things, and I think if there's like the storyline is as long as you're doing it for a reason to grow the company and make it more impactful and communicate that very clearly, and have a clear agenda and clear roadmap as to how you're going to achieve that, then it makes it easier. But if you're pivoting because it was too hard and now you want to make it easier, or you're pivoting because you didn't reach like rocket growth, like a meteoric growth in the first quarter. So those aren't good enough reasons really, right? So I think it's sourcing good reasons, having a roadmap, having a clear vision, and communicating that you're going to do the hard work to build an impactful, scalable company that your investors originally wanted you to build, even though it looks a little bit different.
So you mentioned being lean and capital efficient, and I'm sure a lot of that is around like the team that you're building to make Bumo lean and efficient. Can you share a bit more around like who your co-founder is, what she brings to the table, and then how you've thought about kind of building out the Bumo founding team from there?
Yeah. So absolutely. So Chriselle, she's more of like a brand officer. So she's definitely holds more of like a ambassadorship for Bumo, right? I do the day-to-day. I do the spreadsheet stuff. She does like the media front-facing stuff. So that's kind of how we divvy up the roles. I'm very much like in the weeds every day with everything. And then our team is super small. We're hopefully going to scale our team a lot bigger with some exciting future announcements. But right now we're a team of about 7 people. We have 3 people on the tech side, so head of product and 2 engineers. And then the other 4, I call them diffusion between ops, sales, and marketing.
And your team obviously has done a great job on the media side of things. Can you speak a little bit more around how you guys have navigated that and how you've built a pretty strong following on socials and kind of your strategies for marketing Bumo?
Yeah, so when we started Bumo and kind of launched it into the world, right? That was actually another pivot that I didn't even talk about. That one was on purpose, though. So we were like, hey, how do we do this without a physical space yet and build momentum? And we're like, okay, let's build a parenting community. So we launched Bumo as a parenting digest. It was called the Bumo Digest, almost like the Skim, right? But for parents. So we did that, and that's how we kind of started. So we built our subscriber list that way. And that was actually by design, right? We're like, we build a community, build a great, a newsletter every Sunday for parents to read. Started working with brands because of that, right? So brands wanted to position their products on Bumo, use those brands to amplify Bumo a little bit more. And then what happened was we then, of course, like had the physical space and like the journey of building that, which was really exciting. We also have a lot of course, very thankful. A lot of our angel investors have high influence or are celebrities or KOLs in different spheres. So that has helped amplify Bumo a lot too. And then I really believe that what helped us grow was the authenticity of the brand in terms of everything we did as a reaction to supporting parents. So the digest, of course, it was built a parent community. And then the co-working space was to support parents, of course. The online learning, parents were home, they were teaching their kids, and that was hard for them. And so we built this online program for kids. And so because we did that and everything we did, honestly, I can say without a doubt, to the best of our ability. This co-working space we have, go on our Yelp, go on our review site. It's like effusive reviews, right? Parents are like loving what we've built, and really happy. The online school, so many kids like learn so much. People would tell me that their kids learn to read through our online school. And it was so amazing. And even the marketplace, it's a curated marketplace. It's not just any daycare could be part of our marketplace. It's vetted, it's curated. And so I was telling another parent today, because I love picking up the phone and talking to customers. It's not really like a Yelp for childcare. It's like a Michelin guide, that bookable Michelin guide for childcare. It's curated, it's vetted, and so you feel confident going on and booking. And so I think because everything we did, it came from hyper intention and this commitment to delivering results and quality. And that just kind of like helped build our brand too. And of course, collaborating with lots of great brand partners, our community of moms that just, I call it the mom gang for Bumo. They like amplify everything about Bumo. You'll see that on our social media. And we're just so grateful for such a wonderful community.
I love that. And I think when we first met, you also shared how like mom Facebook groups in like San Francisco were starting to like talk about Bumo. And I feel like that just, like really shows the authentic brand coming through, which is so cool.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we just did an event at a local park, and parents were like, "Oh yeah, we already have an account, and we're on the wait list for Burbank." And so we're like, "You know us, you know what we are," and so it's just
so cool to hear.
Yeah, it is so cool to hear, because for me, as the founder, you always want your company to be even bigger, right? You always dream it to be bigger, and it's like never big enough, right? And never impactful enough. And so sometimes it's nice to just kind of be in the moment and appreciate, where we are. So it's nice.
And then last question, can you share a female founder, investor, or leader who inspires you and a bit about why?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few people, but I'll go from like an OG thing. So Ali Webb, I just love her. And so when I had my company, Mary Education, I remember she was on the cover of like Inc. or Entrepreneur magazine. And I remember I bought it. And I was just obsessed with her. Because I had a brick and mortar business at that time too. Mary Education was brick and mortar. We also did have online tutoring, but we had 4 brick and mortar locations, and I really wanted to be like Dry Bar. And I was like, I want to scale this like, physical footprint. And I don't know if I told Allie this, because Allie, of course, later became our advisor and somebody that I can literally call and ask questions and she'll pick up. I had actually named one of our business models like the Mally model, like, Mary Education Alley model. So it's so creepy. And she probably will think I'm really creepy. So there's that. And then, funny enough, because I was running both companies at the same time for a period of time. So that was also very crazy. So 2018 through 2021, I was basically running both companies at the same time. And Allie's son actually went to Mary Education. So we actually worked with him on his college apps and everything. And she is just a sincere, great person. She has no ego. She is super sharp, super kind, super supportive, a true advocate for women, and an incredible business leader. So I really do admire Allie so much.
Amazing. I got to see her speak at Female Founder Collectives, big summit, maybe 2 years ago, and was really impressed and inspired by her as well. So thank you for the shout out. And then lastly, where can everyone find you and where can they find Bumo?
Yeah, so Bumo, you go to Bümo.com, make a free account. It takes 30 seconds, tell your friends. And then me, you can, it depends on what you want to see. If you want to go on my LinkedIn and see pretty much nothing, because I'm super not active on LinkedIn, I probably should be, then you can find me joan.bumo. I think that's my LinkedIn handle. And then Instagram, if you want to see weird, funny videos and interesting content, you can go to my Instagram, which is joan.bumo. So JOAN.BUMO. And that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining the show. As you know, I'm super excited about what you're building at Bumo, and it was so much fun learning more about your story.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Ruffin. It was so fun chatting with you.